Hey, are you tired of unfortunately emails? You know those emails you get when you've applied for a job and you're, hoping, waiting, expectant. You wait a week, 2 weeks, and finally the company decides to get in touch with you. But they write a long piece of text, and in there you're trying to search to see, okay, am I going to the next round or not? And then all you see is, unfortunately. Well, that means you didn't get the job. And I understand how frustrating that can be because I've been in that boat many times where I've been looking for a new job and being hopeful that all my skills and experience that I've applied and learned over the years would amount to something that people would actually resonate with. And yet, no, unfortunately, I don't have the job. Unfortunately, they won't be progressing with me. Unfortunately, they were able to find other candidates that better suited their needs. What do you do when you face a lot of unfortunatelies? Well, you could decide to actually create your own job. Yeah, give yourself a job. Now, when I talk about giving yourself a job, what do I mean? I'm simply talking about you actually creating a business where you pay yourself from. Okay, the difference between a job and a business is that it actually gives you more flexibility and more control. So there are things that you can do and things you can learn and put them into practice that you could be doing the exact same thing you were doing for an employer, but now doing it for many different people and earning an income as a result of doing that. I mean, there are many reasons why people may choose to stay in paid employment, right? Whether or not they are already employed or they're unemployed and they're looking more for paid employment. Because, I mean, who doesn't like a steady paycheck, right? Knowing every month this amount of money is coming regularly and you don't have to worry. I mean, it helps with dealing with bills, right? There's also the fact that there's stability. There's predictable routine. Yes, besides the fact that you're earning money, just the fact that you're able to go through a predictable routine is kind of helpful. People like that. And once you do that for a number of years, it can be quite hard to make the switch if you're not passionate enough or if you haven't really got enough drive to do so. But it is possible. There's also the social part, right? So people like the fact that they have colleagues they can talk to, maybe gossip with, talk about what happened the night before, that sort of thing. Whereas when you go it on your own, you're on your own and you may or may not have colleagues. You may have people maybe working for you or business partners you might partner with. But if you're starting on your own, it could be a bit lonely and some people don't want to deal with that. And obviously there's the work benefits, right? So particularly in countries where you don't have universal health care, you also would, benefit from health care plans and other benefits that could be involved, right? Paid holidays, that sort of thing. But on the other side, why might you decide to create your own job? Why might you decide to actually go ahead and start a business? Well, there are a few things. The major one that comes up for most people is the fact that they want to be their own boss. There is that. There's also the potential of earning more money than you would if you were working for someone else. Besides that, there's the time flexibility. For some people, having their own business means that they can manage their hours, and so they can manage family commitments around those hours. Beyond that, you've also got self-directed growth. You can actually choose your own career path in terms of skills you want to learn, maybe businesses you want to venture into, and just get into it. So there's that. Just the feeling of self-actualization and making an impact in an area that you want to, as opposed to somewhere that someone else has shown it to you or someone else has suggested to you. That's another reason why people might choose to do that. But let me tell you my story. So my story into entrepreneurship wasn't one that was a jump in a sense. I did start off working for companies, although as a young person, so in my teens, I did have a string of small businesses I tried to start that didn't quite work out, but I learned a lot from the process. Then after graduating, I started working as a data analyst, but I also had skills in media. So whether it was video editing, audio editing, the audio editing actually came from doing some audio editing work for the church I was at the time. And so I built some of those skills there. And then I listened to a lot of audiobooks, and I thought, there was one book I listened to and I thought it was great, but I felt like I could have done a better job than that. And then a light bulb just kind of went on in my head. And I just thought, you know what? Why don't you actually go ahead and see what it takes to be then I just knew about audiobook narrators. So I started doing some more research. And the more I researched, the more I thought, you know what? I can actually do this. I already had the audio editing skills, so I thought, okay, I try it out. I didn't leave my full-time job. That wasn't going to happen at that point. But I kept learning, not just learning. I paid for courses to build my skill. And beyond that, some coaching as well. And then just got into it. So I got myself a microphone and all the kit I needed. I learned about what was needed in terms of recording environment and how to record from home. Beyond that, I also started auditioning. So I didn't spend too much time in the learning phase. I learned enough for what I needed, and I started auditioning and kept learning and tweaking as I went along. And then before I knew it, a few jobs came in. They were really lowly paid to start with, but it felt really good just knowing that money was coming in from something that I just decided to learn. And it was pretty impressive. The job started getting even more and more juicy. So more and more money kept coming in. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Then it got to a point where I was earning quite a decent amount of side income from voiceovers. And then I decided to make the jump. Also because I felt my time in my career at the time as a data analyst was sort of coming to an end, in the sense that I was getting a bit tired of it. And I needed a different change. I needed a change in my circumstances. So I thought, okay, you know what, let me pursue this entrepreneurship thing, because it's something I know I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur from as long as I can remember. I didn't have goals about rising up the career ladder. For me, it was more about running my own business, making an impact that way. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity. And I went in, and then I realized that, with business comes ups and downs, right? So sometimes things are going pretty well, very, very well, and other times not so well. And you have to learn other skills, from sales and marketing to CRMs to dealing with taxes and doing your accounts. All of these things had to be done. And I learned along the process. I probably made a few mistakes here and there, but I learned from the process, and I kept growing and kept building. And that's basically been my foray into voiceovers full time. And it's, like I said, it's been an interesting journey. Like I said, a lot of ups and downs, and even there was a bit of turbulence around the pandemic time. But in general, things have been pretty good. But you see, the way I went into it, I didn't just quit my job. No, I did it part-time until I got to a point where I felt I could actually continue and make a living out of it. Now, there were some times when the living I made was a lot less than what I was expecting, and so those were scary months. I have to admit that. But I get so much fulfillment from it. I also get to teach other people the skills that I've learned, and I spent all these hours practicing and practicing and practicing. That's another thing I should mention. Even though I started auditioning, I made sure I kept practicing and kept improving outside of the auditions as well. So the idea is you just have to keep going at it, keep practicing, but also be committed to learning. Learning is important. Now, when we talk about creating your own job, if you've ever read the book, a very popular book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, he mentions the Cashflow Quadrant, and they've got the acronym. I'll put them on the screen. ESBI. So E stands for employee, S stands for self-employed, B stands for business, and I stands for investment or investor. And basically, this is the journey you go through. So you first of all start off on the E, which is being an employee, and then you move on to being self-employed, which is what we're talking about today, which is creating your own job. But just to point out that in the long run, you don't want to stay at that position. You want to move on to owning a business, and then owning a business and running the business, meaning that you're not involved necessarily with the day-to-day of the business, but you're working on the business, and the business is working for you and generating money. But eventually, the money that's generated there, you want to invest it in such a way that even if you didn't actively do any work, you could still keep earning. That money keeps working for you and keeps earning. So that's the journey. But today we're just talking about moving from being employed to self-employed, but you can jump from being employed to being to owning and running a business if you're so inclined. All right, so what's important for the journey in a sense? Well, let me give you some examples of people who've made transitions. So there are people who have been personal assistants, so PAs to people, to executives, and then have moved from being executives, personal assistants to executives, to becoming virtual assistants to multiple people, or even running a virtual assistant business where they hire other people to work as VAs, so virtual assistants for other people. So that's one thing people have done. Then you've got people who maybe were working in a company filling a particular skill, and then they move on to creating their own company to do the same thing. So for example, imagine somebody who worked for a window cleaning business as the window cleaner. Eventually they can decide to, after learning a bit more about the business, so when you're in a business and you're looking to move on to create your own business, you have to realize that you're not just learning about your role, but also learning about what it takes to run that business. They're very different skills, bear that in mind. So after learning all of that, deciding to then go on and create their own cleaning business, and then fulfilling those orders, either doing it themselves or eventually hiring people and then dealing with the marketing for that as well. Then, of course, like I mentioned, for me, although I was working as a data analyst, I had skills in media. And so I converted that. But you might be saying, oh, but maybe what if I don't have any of these different skills? What can I do? How can I start a business? Like, nobody came out the womb knowing all the skills, right? Everybody learned them and developed them as they went along. So what I would suggest to you is that you think of a particular skill set you want to build and start building it part-time. Don't leave your full-time job if you're still doing that. Start doing it part-time. Okay, and start building the skills there. So let's say, for example, you want to get into content creation. Well, start. Have a bias towards action. So actually get up, start recording. Oh, put up your phone, record. You don't even have to post it to start with. Just get familiar with being in front of the camera, talking to the camera, being very, very engaging, like I'm trying to be now. And then you start that way. Besides that, you also want to find out what are the core activities you should be doing. So there's this thing called the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto principle, which says that 80% of the result is often generated by 20% of the input. So it just means, for example, if you have many customers, let's say you have 100 customers, it's quite likely that 80% of your income is coming from 20% of your customers. And in terms of business activity, you've got to think, okay, what are the things that move the needle for me in business? And then focus on those things and use that to then drive your business forward. So let's say, for example, in order to get work, you need to focus on marketing. So you might spend more time doing marketing than actually doing the work because you are trying to get the work. Once the marketing wheel kind of is going on its own and you have a flywheel going on, then you can spend more time fulfilling jobs. But initially, your job may be majorly finding work to do. I found that was my case when it came to voiceover. I spent a lot of time looking for clients who need my help with their voiceovers, as opposed to necessarily just doing the voiceover. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Then along your learning journey, you realize that you don't have to know everything. You can learn. So pick up books, just search on Amazon or wherever you get books for books on a particular topic that you're looking to learn from, or go on YouTube and find videos. There are many videos there, people talking about a day in their life doing a particular job or the work that they do, like talking about what it takes to get into it. So I'd recommend you go and do that because that's the way you learn. For me, that's how I learned voiceover. I basically scoured the internet and watched almost every video I could find on different aspects of voiceovers. I went through ACX videos in order to find out what their requirements were for audiobooks. And then I also signed up for another course, like I said. And because of that, I kept learning and learning. And learning actually built my confidence to actually let me get on with doing the work. The next thing you want to realize is you adapt. Initially, you start off just trying to learn skills, but eventually you get transformed. You go from being somebody who's interested in something to being somebody who can wear that as a hat or a label on them. So you go from someone who's learning about voiceovers to somebody who becomes a voiceover artist. And by the way, if you are looking to learn about voiceovers and you happen to have come to my channel, you're very welcome. I'm actually going to be running some voiceover coaching sessions. If you're interested in that, go ahead and click the link in the description or the pinned comment, and that will take you to the form where you fill, and then we'll arrange a meeting. And then from there, we can see if we're a good fit and we can get started learning about voiceovers. So some people may be afraid, okay, of going into entrepreneurship because, yeah, it can be scary. I've outlined the reasons why people could be scared of going alone or going into this. You know, there are many things like, okay, there's the surface things like, okay, what would people say? You know, the people who you care about, what would they think about you starting a business? Do they think you'll be successful? Then, you know, you've got not knowing the market, not knowing how to get customers, not knowing all the skills needed. But these are things that can be plugged just by researching and learning and practicing. So it doesn't matter. Everybody who gets somewhere starts off being really bad before they get really good. So you just got to start. Have a bias towards action. I'll say that a few times in my videos, but literally have a bias towards action. Learn just by enough to get you started, get started, and then learn as you go along. That's the process I think that would work for most things that you want to learn. But then people may have fears of it not succeeding. People may have fears that it may not be able to pay the bills. But what I say is anticipate the actions that need to be taken to deal with those fears. So let's say you're afraid it won't pay all the bills. Well, maybe you start off, but don't let that be your main job to start with. Start off working somewhere else that you can get work more easily, and then keep building, keep learning the skills. Yes, it may take you longer than if you were focused on, but at least you have a source of income coming in whilst you're still learning, and that's okay. So just keep pushing through. Yes, there are many things to be afraid of. Maybe you don't understand taxes. You feel like you'd be overwhelmed. you will figure things out. A lot of times we just have to put things in particular buckets and then deal with those buckets, and also be able to reach out for help. So if you need help with taxes, for example, reach out to an accountant, find out what they can help you with, and pay somebody to help you with that. I know I've done that and it's been very helpful. I mean, I'm a voiceover artist, not an accountant. There are many things I just would not be aware of, even if I could do a lot of the things myself. So it's important to realize that and then go ahead and do what needs to be done. Now, there's a concept called Entrepreneurial Apprenticeship by Daniel Priestley, really cool guy who talks about scorecards, marketing, and being a person of influence. And what he says is that if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want that to be your career track, what you can do to reduce the risk and ensure that you have a greater chance of success is to go work for a startup. So work for a 2-3 person business or a small business, see how things work, the ins and outs, and preferably maybe one in the industry that you're in, or one that will give you the skills that you want to learn, even if it means earning less initially. Work in that sort of company, learn about it, learn from them, and then leave there to go set up your thing. By doing that, by learning under an entrepreneur, you learn more than just the skills that you're hired for, right? You learn, because it's a small company, you'll be privy, you'll be able to see other things that happen to make that business actually run well. So that's another way to mitigate the risk and reduce the fears of running it. The more you know, the less you feel afraid, because the more knowledgeable you are and the less unknowns there are when it comes to setting up a business. And then you can go into it. For me, when starting off with voiceovers, I know I've helped a lot of people with different projects they've been on, different businesses, different things like that. I've helped them with that. But beyond that, I've also worked with startups. I've worked with at least maybe 2 or 3 in different capacities, some as co-founders, so me coming on as a co-founder. Others I've just helped on specific projects or specific targets. And those experiences have kind of opened my eyes to the world of entrepreneurship, the different things that are involved, the struggles in there, and how to overcome them. I've also watched a lot of videos on YouTube of people who talk about entrepreneurship, of people who talk about marketing, talk about sales. So actually going a bit more specific and going into the details of the skills that I don't have or I don't know, and learning from the people who do, and paying for courses or coaching programs to help me get over the hurdles that I face in order to be able to do the work that needs to be done. But yes, doing an entrepreneurial apprenticeship with somebody who has already done, who's already told that path, would reduce the risk for you. So that's something to consider. So if you had the choice, let's say you were a new grad and you had the choice between a well-established company and a startup that was promising, it may be worth being at the startup that's promising, just because it gives you much more of a view of how a lot of things work, the ins and outs, and you are more of a generalist, which will help you gain more of the skills that you need to be an entrepreneur, as opposed to being somebody whose focus is on a particular skill or a particular area and doesn't get visibility on other areas of the business. Is that making sense? If it's making sense, give me a thumbs up in the comments so that I know the content I'm saying makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know as well. And if you like, give me a thumbs down. I don't mind. Just let me know so that I know that I'm connecting. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? I hope it does. All right, let's keep going. What would be my action for you or next step? I would say there are a few things. One, like I mentioned, if you're interested in voiceover, check the link in the description and the pinned comment to join the voiceover coaching program that I'm putting together. Besides that, I would say the one thing I want you to take along with you in the idea of creating your own job is have a bias towards action, which means think of an action you can take today that would move you forward or move you in the direction of setting up that business. It may be researching what kind of business you could do. It may be actually learning about a particular skill that would be useful. I mean, there are skills like marketing and sales that would be useful whatever business you get into. And so you could start learning about those and maybe start picking up a particular skill that you're interested in. Search online, find YouTube videos about that domain, that skill, and then start working towards it. The idea in the long run is that you start building the skills, and sometimes it starts off small, but you build up and then you build up the expertise that you need to be able to fulfill that. And when you have a business that is yours and is under your control, you are now able to do things in ways that you control. So focus on the marketing, for example, get different customers, or maybe target particular niches that maybe a previous employer, potential employer who didn't hire you could have done better. And then eventually you build yourself a source of income that's independent of you working for somebody and you're able to just earn more money that way in the long run, build skills that you wouldn't have built otherwise, and be your own boss. I hope this video helps you. Let me know if it did, if it resonated with you in any way. It's something that I've been thinking about, although for me, I'm aiming more towards the business side of things as opposed to necessarily being just self-employed. But as a voiceover artist, I have been operating as a self-employed person in a sense, even though I do have a business set up for it. The idea is, okay, where do I go from here? How do I expand? That will be the subject for another video. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. In the meantime, check out some other videos that are going to appear on this side of your screen or on this side of your screen. I think you'll find them interesting. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye. And have a bias towards action. Go do something today. All right, take care.